Welcome to the Net Profit Podcast with Ryan Kibler, your net profit CFO, helping business owners like you grow their net profit one episode at a time. And now your host, Ryan Kibler.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Net Profit Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Kibler, the Net Profit CFO. Today, I have Patrick Ungashick with me with NAVIX Consultants. I am very excited to talk with Patrick today. They really specialize in exit planning and helping businesses transition onto new ownership. It has been a long while since we have talked about exit planning, but I think it is a very important part of business. So, Patrick, thank you for taking the time and coming on the show.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. My pleasure to be here.
Well, I really, really appreciate what you guys do. There's a lot that goes into exit planning, and I think a lot of owners maybe don't have the full picture or full scope of, what it really takes to exit a business in a good way. But before we get to that, I would love to hear a little bit more about your background, kind of how you got to where you are today. If you would just take a minute and kind of share a little bit about you and your background.
Sure. Thank you. Well, the quick story is my first job coming out of undergrad is I spent about a half a dozen years in New York City, including doing I was the junior guy, obviously, right out of school, doing some low to mid-market investment banking. I moved to Atlanta a long time ago, which is where I founded, along with some partners, our companies. We've got several companies, including NAVIX Consultants. And then we're some of those people, Ryan, who relocated during COVID. And now my personal address is now in South Florida, although a lot of the team is back in Atlanta. But I travel a lot because most of what I do is speaking across the US and Canada. And by the way, before we go any further, thank you. You said my last name, Ungashick, perfectly. Everybody trips up on it. I'll just let you know when you reverse engineer it back into the original German, Ryan, it translates back and it means clumsy or incompetent. So anyone who speaks German well enough to figure it out usually gets a good chuckle, but you nailed it. So I think we're good to go to dive in.
All right, awesome. Well, yes, thank you for that. And thanks for the little backstory. That's fun. Yeah, so let's dive in. Let's get started. Man, exit planning, really wide topic. Obviously, I think a lot of business owners, have a vision for exit to a certain extent. They want that to be their retirement. They want it to go well, but there's so much that goes into it in order to really do it in the right way, I think. But tell us a little bit, maybe a couple of pointers just off the top, a couple of things that business owners typically miss and maybe some mistakes that are made.
And you're right. I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot to show a business owner why it's really not an exaggeration to say almost everything is on the line with regards to their exit. The financial win that nearly all business owners aspire to reach in some way, whatever that number is. You're correct. Most business owners are deeply concerned about making sure they leave the company in good hands. People and customers are treated well and consistent with their values, and that they get the exit on their own terms when they want and a transition that they want. And all of that is either achieved or not achieved, depending upon how successful the outcome is, whether it's a sale or family transition or you're passing the baton to the internal leadership. So there's a lot at stake. And I know we don't have, hours and hours and hours, but we could take hours and hours and hours to unpack this. I think probably the first one or two pointers right out of the gate would be number one, most business owners, if they've never been through an exit before on either side of an event, most business owners pretty dramatically underestimate the amount of time it takes to get ready. There's a lot of thinking out there. There's actually some literature out there that says, hey, you know what? Build a great company. And then when you're in that final stretch, that last year to maybe 24 months, now's the time to start thinking about your exit strategy. That's way too late. I mean, what you built is what you built at that point in time. Buyers and successors want to know about the strength of the team. They want to know about scalability of systems. They want to know about the quality of the brand. They want to know about your systems, like your technology and how your business operates. You're not reinventing your company. You're not building an elite leadership team in 12 to 24 months if it doesn't already exist. So ideally, business owners are starting proactive thinking and planning a good 4 or 5 years before they want any specific exit event to happen, so that they've got enough time and enough runway to do more than just pretty it up and really create something that's highly sellable and scalable and transferable. So that's probably the first tip, is start as early as possible. I think the second one, again, right out of the gate, would be, most business owners, very successful owners and ownership teams and leadership teams, Ryan, typically have never done this before. Most owners only have one exit in them, and that's fine. No problem with that, but get an education. Start, the reading, start talking to people, start sitting down and picking your advisors' brains, talk to other business owners who have exited before really early on, and begin to get yourself up to speed on at least some of the basics, because you can't really afford a situation where you're deep in the exit process and you're 6, 12, 18 months away from a desired event, such as a sale of the company, and you're realizing, oh, nobody told me that. I would have done something differently a little bit earlier if I would have understood that issue or that dynamic. So start early thinking and eventually planning, and get yourself the education. The resources are out there, advisors, books, AI. It's all out there to help get that crash course and get up to speed pretty quickly.
Yeah, love those 2 tips. And I want to go back to timeline for a minute too. A lot of owners maybe don't have the perspective that a lot of new buyers, they want the owner to stick around for a
Right.
little while and transition. So, and usually that time frame can be 1 to 2 years, maybe even longer, depending on company size. Is that fair to
Absolutely.
say?
Yep, absolutely. And often to the seller, if we're talking about a sales situation, often that's not exactly exciting for the seller to hear.
Yeah,
Wait a minute. I got to stay for years for you to even want to buy my business and for me to get full value from this. And you're right, Ryan. And Ryan, when that happens, it's almost always a byproduct that of the seller perceiving, and sometimes they're right, that the company is highly dependent on that owner or the owners for day-to-day, week-to-week execution. When the owner is the number one salesperson, when the owner is the glue that holds the team together, when the owner is the one who's solving the most important problems within the organization, if you were the buyer, you wouldn't let that individual go anywhere either.
yeah,
So the secret, it's not a secret really, but the response, the way to avoid that outcome, is to build an organization that on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis doesn't need the owner's direct hands-on involvement. You've got to build the team up, and that team's got to be successful so that when it is time to exit, and again, if we're talking about a sale, you can look the buyer in the eye and go, you don't need me for very long. Maybe a transition period, 6 months, maybe 12 at the outset, but this thing has already got a great team, and you won't miss me. And that's the best possible scenario to get to, which, going back to what we were talking about before, Ryan, that's not a 6 to 12 to 18 month process to build a team that performs at that level, right? That takes years to get started and create that kind of team before I'm planning on going anywhere if I'm the owner.
for sure. Yeah. And I think, then, well, I'll get to the second piece, which is, the education standpoint. I mean, obviously, I'm a big proponent of mentorship and coaching. Obviously, that's what I do. Why not get somebody that has been through this not just once, but many times with many business owners, that's just going to give you massive, massive shortcut and prepare you for these things that we're talking about, and help you build that team so that you can exit more quickly as the owner and not stick around for a couple years. That's
Absolutely.
kind of the way that I look at it.
Absolutely. I mean, this is not a topic to cut your own teeth on yourself, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to, as we were talking about a few minutes ago, there's too much at stake, and there's too many great resources out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I want to kind of go to a third piece, and this is obviously biased because I'm a CFO and this is, so I'm going to kind of get financial, but from my experience too, is I think get a good handle on what your business is really worth
Yes,
early. And maybe, I'll let you talk to that some, but I think a lot of times owners have a number in their head, what they think their business might be worth, and reality doesn't always align with that number that's in their head. So talk a little bit about that and kind of, improving that as well.
no, you're exactly correct. Conversations with potential buyers start with understanding the company's financial performance. Buyers need to see the data presented in a specific way, and sellers need to, this goes back to the experience and the prep, sellers need to know what that way is. For example, if your company is running on cash accounting method, that's fine, but buyers are almost always going to be looking at the company through accrual accounting. So we got to be prepared for those steps that are necessary for that financial piece. what a company is worth is a whole nother podcast episode unto itself. But to drill down, especially in a sale and an exit situation, in most industries, in most situations, the conversation starts with what's the company's performance with regards to its earnings. Most people use EBITDA, right? Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization to understand the company's really true earnings power is why EBITDA is most commonly looked at. But then from there, if you're the seller, first, so that means as the seller, you've got to be prepared to be able to show your EBITDA ideally over time. And ideally, that number's been improving because your company's been performing better and better and growing. But you can't, it's not just limited to that. The exercise also to get ready for an exit and a sale and to maximize value, you ideally want to be able to show what is commonly referred to as adjusted EBITDA or normalized EBITDA. And that, if anyone of your audience is unfamiliar with that terminology, that just speaks to the reality is a lot of privately held companies, if I look at their earnings on paper, if I look at the current profit and loss statement or the current income statement, I'm probably not seeing the true earnings picture of that business because, first of all, the tax code creates pressure on business owners to do things to lower their income in order to lower their tax bill. Good things. This is the American way. Things like, pay yourself a little bit of extra or have the company car. A very quick story about that. The very first client I ever worked with, Ryan, I was looking at their balance sheet and the balance sheet said company vehicle F-150. And I said, oh, okay, so the business owner's driving around a truck, right? Company vehicle. And when I first visited that company, in the parking spot right outside the front door was this beautiful cherry red Mercedes convertible. And it had a vanity plate on it and the tag plate said F-150. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now. This is how this works. So anyway, back to getting the financials ready. You've got to go through the financials and you've got to restate them. That's often called normalizing them or adjusting them to show what would the true earnings be if this owner wasn't doing things, extra owner perks and benefits, and also to remove non-reoccurring, unusual one-off expenses or one-off revenues in order to create that normal baseline level of earnings. As a CFO, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I know you probably do this work for your own clients. The reality is the math isn't hard to do. However, it just takes somebody with experience. It takes somebody who's been through mergers and acquisitions transactions before so that they know the steps. So the very common tactic a lot of our clients will consider using, because a lot of our clients don't have a CFO on their team who has transaction experience. Fine, great. Talk to an external CFO, bring in a temporary advisor, temporary for just that, final work as you're leading up to a sale in order to get the financial expertise, because that's exactly where the valuation conversation with a buyer is going to start. It's going to start by understanding the company's financial performance, and sellers need to make sure they're presenting an accurate picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I want to go back to something you said, the math's not hard, right? I think it's just knowing the right places to look. That's
Right.
the biggest thing. And, I think either side, buyer or seller, knowing how to kind of make those adjustments and understanding why they're there, super important to
Super
really
important.
understand.
Yeah, it's not, we're thankful that our phone rings with potential clients contacting us, like lots of businesses have reached that level. And I'll tell you a very common conversation, I'll tell you once a month is not an unusual occurrence, is, well, I'll talk to a business owner, says, yeah, a buyer reached out and contacted us and maybe we might have something exciting here. And great. Well, tell me where you are in the process. Well, we signed an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, which is really important. And we sent over our financials to the potential buyer so they can take a look. And I'm like, great. So your adjusted EBITDA, is it trending up or down? And a very common answer, Ryan, is what's that? Well, right away, we're off to a really rocky start in terms of trying to make something good happen there, because we've already shown that we don't even have our ducks in a row on the financial piece.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
love this conversation so far. We've covered timeline and just underestimating how long it takes to kind of exit. We've covered the financial piece, and then we've covered the education piece. As far as go out, don't do this alone. Especially if it's your first time, go
Right.
out, get some education. I think to go back and kind of speak to that, lack of education or lack of experience there probably gets a result that you don't want or is less than ideal, less than what it could have been. And that's where I think you and your team really come in and help and make sure that that doesn't happen. Any other kind of major pieces that you guys see that owners should be aware of, good things
Sure.
to do or things that they miss that we should go into next?
Sure. Well, building on what we covered so far, so if I have my team that's helping me, either an internal team or external team, and I know my company's level of financial performance, because again, that's usually where the valuation conversation starts,
Yep.
especially in an exit or sales situation. Then from there, back to that doing your homework and research, it's not difficult in most situations to go out and talk to people, or again, do research online and AI to understand in a sales situation, if that's my exit strategy, what are companies in my industry and in my size range currently selling for? Because in most situations, your research will reveal that there is a range typically expressed as a multiple of earnings, like a
Yep.
multiple of EBITDA, as to what companies in that industry and that size range are selling for. So, for example, if I'm a plumbing supply business and I have $1 million of adjusted EBITDA per year, if that's my company current size, well, if I go out and do some research, my numbers are hypothetical, Ryan, but they're probably going to be somewhat realistic. I
Sure.
might do some research by talking to other business owners in my industry, researching online, talking to my advisors or consultants. And I might learn, well, the companies in my space are selling for between 4 and 6 times EBITDA in that example. Well, okay, great. Well, if we are $1 million EBITDA business, that tells me right there between 4 and 6 million is a reasonable estimate for anticipating what my company might be worth in a sale. If I'm a $3 million EBITDA business, do that math, 12 to 18, I think is how that works out. So right
Yep.
away, business owners can gain a pretty good understanding, get a sense of what the market might pay for their business. But it's more than just getting that market intel, because from there, Ryan, what happens is, okay, well, if I just learned that companies in my industry are currently, generally speaking, selling for between 4 and 6 times EBITDA, for example, great. I want to know who's getting a 4 and who's getting a 6,
Yep.
because what can we do to make sure we avoid the discounted range 4 and we secure the premium valuation 6? And a lot of it goes back to what we started to talk about in the very beginning of conversation here today, which is what's the quality of your leadership team? How owner dependent or independent does your company run? The financial reports and records and forecasts, are they accurate? Are they timely? Are they prepared for the buyers, like we briefly discussed? And how scalable are my company's systems? All of those drivers influence whether the company gets a discount multiple or a premium multiple. And they also affect other things like, does the buyer need you to stick around for a few years? Or can you have a quick transition because you built up a great team? So the market research that you and I are in violent agreement is so important. It not just informs business owners about sort of the landscape, it also gives business owners a path to follow and say, okay, well, with whatever time we have left before we want to achieve an exit, here's some of the steps we can take in order to maximize its value to a buyer. And by the way, for a few minutes now, we've been talking about presumably a sale situation. All of those same steps contribute to success in a family-owned business, if it's going to be a family-owned leadership succession. Because if I want to pass my company to the next family generation, I still need to build a great leadership team. I still need to make sure the company can grow without me being involved every step of the way. Otherwise, when I turn it over to the kids, it's probably going to struggle greatly if I'm too involved in day-to-day, week-to-week operations. All that same stuff still applies.
For sure. Yeah. I've seen statistics from Forbes recently. Family-owned businesses, second generation, the business typically fails about 50% of the time. Third generation, that goes up to about 95% of the time. So I know for a fact that business owners are missing a lot of this stuff, especially as we talk about those family transitions. So these are all really, really good things to know. And I want to go back to the multiple really quickly. I'm glad that you brought this up. If you're an owner and you're looking to sell soon, and let's say it is going to be to actually sell, not necessarily transition internally. If you do your research, you find out 4 to 6 times multiple, and just using your number, let's say $1 million in EBITDA. If you want $10 million for your business, you've got some work to do, right?
That's right.
Because right now you're 4 to 6, and again, Patrick, I love your point on this, that start earlier rather than later. Don't make this a last minute thing, because if you want to get to that $10 million mark, it's going to take some time, right? We're probably talking about doubling your total earnings
That's
if
right.
you want that $10 million mark. So love everything that we've put together so far. And I love, kind of sending owners out there to go and do that research.
Yeah, because you're so right, because owners really set themselves up for success if they are thinking about these issues early enough and they give themselves enough time. So let's just build on the perfect example you offered up, Ryan, which is if I'm sitting here telling myself, I think I'd like to exit maybe 5 years from now. Maybe that's a specific age, or maybe I'm thinking that's going to be when the market, or maybe my kids will have all be off to college at that point in time, whatever my trigger timeline is. Okay, great. If I have advisors who are helping me and I've got the EBITDA thing accurately calculated and I do my research and I know it's 4 to 6 and I want to get to 10 and we're currently at 4 to 6, if I've got, for example, 5 years before I want to exit, now I can go, okay, is my company growing fast enough in order to get that valuation improvement? And if it's not, what do I need to do that is going to have a strategic impact to materially grow faster and gain more value? Or maybe do I need to change my goals? Maybe I say, look, I don't know we can grow it any faster. I'm just going to have to hang in there a little bit while longer. Better to know that now rather than get that bad news right before you thought you were going to sell and you were going to make 10 and all the offers are coming in for 6.
Yeah.
So the planning ahead, getting an understanding as to how this works, accurately assessing your company's potential value in the marketplace, and especially in a sales situation, it allows business owners to make such smarter, better, more strategically beneficial decisions.
Yes. And the other thing that I want to say that was triggered in my mind as you were talking there is, it's probably not, let me just get my EBITDA to the mark for 1 year
Right.
where, we've grown and we had a really big year and now's the time. No, one of the things you said earlier is we're looking at a trend and what have the numbers been over the last several years, because a buyer is not going to come in and give you a valuation based on just your most recent year, because that could be, again, like an anomaly. Maybe you had a
Right.
really big year and then they're kind of overpaying for the business, so to speak.
Yes, buyers are going to use history for informational purposes. They're ultimately, the size of the check they're going to write is ultimately driven by the confidence, the numbers and the performance that they have confidence in going forward. So if my business was perpetually bumping along at $1 million of EBITDA, and the last 12 months we had one big win in the market that we're not going to duplicate, and we jumped up to 2 million, that's nice. But if I want to get paid on that higher baseline of financial performance, I've got to show the buyer why that's a new floor. We're going to be able to support that number going forward. If it was an anomaly, great. I hope you pocketed some of the profits from that nice win, that nice bump. But if your business falls back down to a new normal afterwards, that's how buyers are going to value it.
Yes. And I'm sure, again, as you were talking here, like, as I'm just thinking here in my head, I'm sure these last few years have been really interesting, I'm sure, in the buy sell marketplace, because we've got to factor in, well, what did COVID do to this business? Did it
Yes.
trend it up? Did it trend it down? What's it going to look like after? I'm sure that has been very, and kind of factoring into, we know a lot of businesses failed during COVID. So, were businesses able to that survived, able to take additional market share when we came out of COVID? I'm sure that has thrown a big wrench in all the deals that have been going on lately as well.
It did. I mean, clearly there were some companies that were really, horribly hurt by COVID, not to mention people who suffered, families as well. But from a business standpoint, but there were also businesses that enjoyed incredible bumps because of COVID. We had a client that was a distributor of motorcycles, a brand that a lot of people have heard of. And as COVID hit, all of us as a nation ran outside and started to do outdoor things because we could, and there wasn't much we could do inside. And a whole
Yep.
bunch of people bought motorcycles. And this particular motorcycle distributor, like a lot of motorcycle distributors and boat distributors and camping companies, all that was related. Anyway, this client of ours, their sales and their profits tripled during the
Wow.
time of COVID. And they were like, okay, well, we're now going to go to market. We're going to get paid 3 times for our business what it would have ever been worth before. And The answer was no, buyers are not going to do that because I think everybody quickly figured out that was not sustainable.
Yeah,
Here we are. By the time we're recording this, a lot of the dust has settled and a lot of normal has returned, but not everywhere. And you are correct. We haven't said this, but as a CFO, Ryan, that when businesses go to sell, buyers typically want to see 5 years of historical financials. In order to get that sense of history, well, 5 years takes us all the way back into the heart of the COVID years. So it's still part of the story. And buyers absolutely want to understand, what's the new normal for your company now that most of that dust has settled.
for sure. A lot of things going on in the marketplace right now. That to me makes things fun. But
It does. And in general, it's we've had so many things that grab our headlines, and that just seems to be a cycle that probably doesn't never end. If it's not COVID, if it's interest rates, if it's not interest rates, it's tariffs, it's always something. However, what is proven incredibly constant is if you have a higher performing company, there are buyers out there. There are far more buyers than there are sellers, not maybe in terms of actual count, but just in terms of supply and demand. High performing companies are still commanding premium valuations if you've built something that sellers are going to look at and go, that's performing well, and I can take that and I can scale it even further. So it was a great time to be a seller a year ago. It was a great time to be a seller 5 years ago. It's still a great time to be a seller.
yeah, love to hear that. Well, I wanna shift gears here, kind of at the end of our show, and you are an author, and your new book is out, A Day for Leadership. Let's talk a little bit about the book. We were talking a little bit off air before we started, and
Right.
sounds like a very interesting book and one that I'm gonna have to pick up for myself.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a bit of a zag in my career journey here. We zig and zag from time to time. I've written 2 other books, both about helping business owners get ready for exit. For example, the first one is called Dance in the End Zone. And those were fun to write. And they definitely have helped a lot of business owners, which makes me very honored to get that kind of feedback. But Ryan, I was always the kid who was the history nerd. It's been true my whole life. And as a business leader and owner myself, and also somebody who has had the pleasure to work with hundreds of other business leaders and our team, even many hundreds more, my passion lies in that intersection between history and leadership. And I always wanted to write a book like A Day for Leadership, which came out a few months ago, because I think business owners and their teams need powerful stories of leadership in action. Stories are, Brene Brown is this wonderful speaker and author that many of us follow or know of. And she has this many amazing quotes, but my favorite of hers is that stories are just data with a soul. And when we've got great stories, we resonate with them. And there's amazing leadership stories, especially in periods of great turmoil and sacrifice and difficulty. And so I looked back at D-Day, which is one of those turning points in World War II. It only happened 80 years ago, but it still occupies a lot of our books and a lot of our movies and a lot of our culture. However, as a historical event, D-Day and other major events around that time period, Ryan, my observation is they're not really studied for their business lessons. And so A Day for Leadership takes these 8 specific case studies, stories from the D-Day battle, not the stuff that's in the movies, the soldiers charging across the beach. Those are just awe-inspiring moments.
Sure.
But I don't know that they're really transferable today to today's business challenges. My book, A Day for Leadership, looks at leadership moments and stories that are less well known, but are very much applicable to the challenges and the issues that companies and their teams face today, unpacks those stories. I think they're riveting, and then extracts the lessons that we can apply to our businesses. It was a lot of fun to write. It came out a couple months ago. The market's really liking it. It's already been an Amazon bestseller, which is exciting. So thank you for asking about it.
Yes, absolutely. I will have to, like I said, I'll have to pick that up. I'm looking forward to reading it. So,
Right.
so Patrick, I love this conversation. I mean, I want to give you an opportunity, tell my audience and all the listeners out there, best place to find you and work with you. Where would that be? And other social links as well, if you're interested. Yeah, where would that be?
Thank you, Ryan. We try to make it with a last name like Ungashick, you got to try and make it easy for people to find you, right? So the best place to go is the website that is my name, Patrick Ungashick, UNGASHICK.com. And there you can find information about connecting back to NAVIX, our exit planning consulting business, as well as information about my books and my speaking.
All right. Very cool. Well, awesome. Appreciate that. We will make sure to get that down in the show notes. And Patrick, again, I just want to thank you for taking the time today. I think we've unpacked a lot in this episode, a lot of good information. I would encourage my audience, go back and listen to this for a second time. Again, thank you for taking the time and coming on the show.
My pleasure, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, until next time, everybody, go accelerate your profits. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Net Profit Podcast with Ryan Kimler. Make sure to subscribe or follow the show on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget to check the show notes for our guest contact information and to connect with Ryan on his website, netprofitcfo.com.